Well, thank you, sweet Daisica and the music team. It's just so great. And the two Davids who got us warmed up here this morning, thank you so much. My topic today is intentional creation in action. Now, our theme for this month has been creating a loving spiritual community. And I'm going to talk with you a little about today about why having a spiritual community is very important. And a little bit about how the spiritual community functions. And then we'll move on and look at our parent organization, which is still another spiritual community, but at a larger level. Now, I want to say right up front that our spiritual community here is a loving spiritual community. And this is not something that we're trying to create. However, I see it as a living organism. And as you know, if you get a dog or a cat, you bring it home, and that's not the end of it. It has to be maintained every day, and it gives you something in return. But it's an ongoing, dynamic process. And that's the way it is in our community, is that we are continually creating it every day. And it is absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful that we have it here as part of our life and that we share it with each other. Now, when I was thinking about the importance of a community, I thought back about why is it important to me personally. And it's very important to me personally. I first went to a spiritual community in 1985, a long time ago. And I'm not clear why I went, but I am very clear about why I kept going and why I have continued to go all these many years. It was a new take on religion for me. And I believe that that's why we have over 400 communities in Centers for Spiritual Living today, because I know it's a new take for so many other people. This was an accepting place, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, or ethnic background. No question about that. These were like-minded people. And I started learning from the Sunday talks. And I think that everyone who comes to a center begins learning from our Sunday morning talks. We have a lot of wonderful classes, which I'll talk about in a minute. However, we began learning from the Sunday morning talks. Now, our founder, Ernest Holmes, said that we are a teaching community, not a preaching community. Sometimes those kind of overlap, and we can't really tell which we're doing. But one of the good things about our centers is that we didn't have to check our brains at the door and pick them up on the way out. And unfortunately, in some brands of religion, it almost seems like that is a requirement. Some of the ideas that I have learned, now we talk here about what we teach and what we believe, but these are things that I learned which are not necessarily the same things that we teach. And I just listed about 10 or 12 of these things which I'll hurriedly go through. And the first one was the location of God. I found out that God was not an old man in the sky who was keeping score or anything like that, because I know that the divine spirit, which is a better name for what we call God, I think, than God is, but we use it because it's easier to say God. And I found out that it was individualized around, through, and as me, around, through, and as every person. This was a little difficult to wrap my head around, but I got it. And I am so grateful that I have it. And one of my favorite teachers, Thomas Troward, has told us that God is life, light, love, peace, power, joy, and beauty. And that all of these things we are, that God lives as each of us. Now, another thing is that thought is creative. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, says that we live in a universe that responds with mechanical regularity to the spontaneity of our thought. I love that. And this has been happening all of our lives. We realize that this is always taking place. And we realize that because of this, if we change our thinking, we can change our lives. These are a couple of our slogans that we use here. Then there's evolution. And I'm not talking simply about biological evolution, but I certainly am talking about that as well. But evolution is an eternal process that has, as far as we know, has always been going on and will always be going on. And physical evolution is something that we can almost see happening before our eyes during our lifetimes. And then in the process related to this evolution, Spirit, as far as we know, created the universe by self-contemplation and continued doing this up until the point of creating a conscious being that was conscious of being conscious, and that's us. As far as we know, we're the only living beings who are conscious of being conscious. And at this point, our individualization of God as us allowed us to be co-creators with the divine spirit. And so we are, by self-contemplation, we are operating this whole process of evolution right now. Another thing is that our teaching is that there's no power of evil. There's only one power, and that's the one that we call God. However, we're not saying that there is no such thing as evil, but it is an inverted use of that power. And there's no devil that we have to be looking out for. That, again, that's just an inverted use of the one power. Sin. Sin simply means missing the mark, missing the target, and we can always try again. We are not punished for our sins, but we are punished by our sins. If we spill a hot coffee on our hands, we are punished by that mistake that we made. We're not going to be punished for it in the hereafter. Heaven and hell are states of consciousness. And we don't have to worry about going to hell. Some of us have already been there. And then there's the Bible. The Bible is a good book. We don't question that. However, it's not to be taken literally. There are parts in the Bible that were never intended to be accepted literally. There are some very good stories in there, and we use them, and we take what's really good and apply that to our lives, and we take the rest of it for whatever it is, either a myth or a parable or something like that. And then there's Jesus. Jesus is the great example, not the great exception. The great exception, the great example of God in and as man, and of course that also applies to women. And so we do know that because of this great example, that we also are individualizations of this divine spirit, which we talk about over and over again. Jesus came up with 2 commandments for us, which released us from having to worry about those 10 that were in the Old Testament. And his 2 commandments were to love God and to love one another. And these we practice. We really encourage everyone to practice. And at the end of our service, at the end of this talk, I have a vision statement that we will go into on that. There is one subjective mind. This subjective mind created our physical bodies in the first place and maintains our physical bodies. And we can access this subjective mind through the process of spiritual mind treatment. And considering that it made our physical bodies in the first place, then it can certainly heal anything that appears to be going wrong with our bodies. So by spiritual mind treatment, we are able to access the subjective mind and use that power through our power of knowing and thinking to erase any problems that show up in our physical body temples. Now we do have licensed practitioners. I learned that too. We have licensed practitioners who are teachers, and they're professional prayers, and they can do spiritual mind treatments for themselves and for other people as well. Now, I'd have to throw out there that all ministers were practitioners before they became ministers. And I have been a practitioner for a long time. Okay? Now, it's very important for us to also remember that we are open at the top. So as new scientific developments are revealed, then we accept them. If they have been proven, we accept these new developments. And as new ones are revealed in the future, we will continue to. We don't try and sweep them under the rug. So anyway, our individual centers are places where we learn, where we teach and we learn. Primarily, I would say that's the major reason. However, we also celebrate. Now, in some cities, outsiders refer to us as happy churches. And I don't know if this center has ever been referred to as a happy church or not, but I hope it has, because I consider this to be a happy church. And we can be happy because we have a user-friendly philosophy, one which we can celebrate, and which we do celebrate. And we just enjoy being around with each other here because we're like-minded people. And we know that we are truly blessed all the time, even though this doesn't necessarily show up on the physical level in every moment. Of course, our centers are healing, centers of healing consciousness, and we have the practitioners and the ministers who can do spiritual mind treatments for any person. And of course, as we learn more, then everybody learns to do spiritual mind treatments for themselves. It's not something that has to be done by somebody else. We don't need an intermediary for going between us and the divine spirit, which is fully present in us in the first place. Now, because we have a lot to be grateful for, because we do celebrate here, then we just sort of automatically want to assist other people, to be here for other people. And I see it here all the time. We have people who volunteer to be servants in our community. We have a lot of jobs that people do on Sundays, and we have plenty of people who do it. And I want to tell you, because I've done just about everything there is that one can do in a center, I know that there is more pleasure and more good that comes to you from serving than you get from being served. It's a two-way situation. Now, we also have a desire to reach out and help people in our larger community. And sometimes we can do that directly, physically, by reaching out to people in our larger community around our centers, but sometimes it's more convenient to work through organizations or agencies that do this as their primary job. And so we can and we do work with other agencies. Now, we have smaller communities within our community. And we call these smaller communities classes. And I will tell you right now that in our classes, we really get to know people. Really get to know people well. I can't even begin to tell you how many classes I've taken, and I can't tell you how many I have actually been able to facilitate or teach. But in every case, I have gotten to know people better. I have made friends, and I know that everyone in the class makes friends in the class. This is the grassroots of our centers. And we always encourage people to take classes. Now, every person who's a member of our center, or any other center for that matter, is an owner of the center and vitally important to the functioning of the center. Now, of course, the people that I am addressing this to are not here today, but we know that they will be here. We sort of have a rotating door. People come some days and they don't come other times. But it's when you are not here, you are missed. And I can tell you that because I'm here almost all the time. And I miss people when they're not here. We don't like to see a lot of vacant seats here. We like to see our members and visitors showing up and being here for us. And it makes a big difference because each person is a teacher. It's not just the practitioners and the ministers who are teachers. Every person is a teacher in their own way. And you may think because you come and sit here and don't say a word to anybody, maybe you don't, maybe you do, but it doesn't make any difference whether you do or do not, because it makes a difference. It makes a difference to the functioning of our center. Now, as far as classes are concerned, we normally offer these classes during the week. Now, this is not the same thing as a Sunday school class that you would find in some of the other brands of religion. We really delve deeply into the teachings of our philosophy. But through the classes, we strengthen the fabric of our community. Every week, we have people here who have never been here before, and this is just great. Some of these people are seeking a spiritual home, but whether they are or not, this is an opportunity for each of our members to act as a teacher. It may just be by smiling and saying hi to somebody. But if you take classes, then you become a more efficient teacher. And that is along with enhancing your own life, first and foremost. As you enhance your life, as you're lifted up, you lift up other people with you. Now, I did want to also mention that you're never too old to take classes. You can look at me and know that. Okay. Now, we have a parent community in Golden, Colorado, which is outside of Denver. And this parent community is over the more than 400 communities of Centers for Spiritual Living. They're not just in the United States. We have a lot of centers in Canada and Mexico, in the Ukraine, and all over the world, and they are really spreading at all times. And so our parent center is able to coordinate all of this and allow it to move smoothly. They provide online classes for people who are not able to take classes at a center, because there are some states in the United States that do not even have a Center for Spiritual Living. And so people living there who want to take classes are able to do so by taking them online. The center also publishes books and publishes a magazine called the Science of Mind magazine. It's in its 90th year. And this Science of Mind magazine has daily meditations and has a lot of uplifting articles and tells us what's going on in various parts of the country. Now, those daily meditations are very good for keeping us centered. I have used those as part of my daily spiritual practice for a long time. They also maintain a website, which is very useful. And we have elected leaders that all of these centers will elect the leaders, and then they represent us in meetings of religious leaders from various brands of religion. Now, there is a tool that we use in religious science called visualization. Visualization is not the same thing as visioning, which is another tool that we use, but we'll talk about that some other time. Visualization is a process that is like planting a seed. And we all know that when we plant a seed, we expect it to germinate and grow and flourish into a particular plant. In visualization, we visualize something that we want to come forth, something that we want to experience. This is a very important tool in the creative process. And a few years ago, many of our leaders the practitioners, the ministers, and other people from all over got together and created a global vision. This global vision tells us where we stand on certain issues. This vision is entitled A World That Works for Everyone, and I really want all of you to have a copy of it, which our ushers are giving you right here and right now. And in just a moment, I'm going to invite you to join with me, and we're going to read it aloud. But I would like you to remember as we read it that this is telling us what we stand for in the world. This is related to that second commandment, to love everyone as we love ourselves, as we love God. This was worked on for a long period of time. There was a lot of prayer and contemplation involved in creating it. And so I'm just going to invite you to join with me now, and we will read it. But the important thing that I feel is for you to take it home with you and read it again, and maybe a few times, and keep it and maybe read it again a week or so from now, because it is empowering. So let's read this together. We envision a people, all beings and all life as expressions of God. We see a world in which every person lives in alignment with his or her highest spiritual principle, emphasizing unity with God and connection with each other. A world in which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. We envision humanity awakening to its spiritual magnificence and discovering the creative power of thought. A world where every person discovers his or her personal power and ability to create an individual life that works within a world that works for everyone. We envision a world in which we live and grow as one global family that respects and honors the interconnectedness of all life. A world where this kinship with all life prospers and connects through the guidance of spiritual wisdom and experience. We envision a world where personal responsibility joins with social conscience in every area of the political, corporate, academic, and social sectors, providing sustainable structures to further the emerging global consciousness. We envision a world where each person has enough food, a home, and a sense of belonging. A world of peace and harmony, enfranchisement, and justice. We envision a world in which resources are valued, cared for, and grown, where there is generous and continuous sharing of these resources. We envision a worldwide culture in which forgiveness, whether for errors, injustices, or deaths, is the norm. We envision a world which has renewed its emphasis on beauty, nature, and love through the resurgence of creativity, art, and aesthetics. We envision a world that works for everyone and for all of creation. And together we say, and so it is. Namaste.